The Mabinogion. Chapter 6. The Dream of Ronabwy. Madoc the son of Merdud possessed Powys within its boundaries, from Porfod to Gwaun in the uplands of Arwisli. And at that time he had a brother, Iorwerth the son of Merdud, in rank not equal to himself. And Iorwerth had great sorrow and heaviness because of the honor and power that his brother enjoyed, which he shared not. And he sought his fellows and his foster brothers, and took counsel with them what he should do in this matter. And they resolved to dispatch some of their number to go and seek a maintenance for him. Then Madoc offered him to become master of the household, and to have horses and arms and honor, and to fare like as himself. But Iorwerth refused this. And Iorwerth made an inroad into Loegria, slaying the inhabitants and burning houses and carrying away prisoners. And Madoc took counsel with the men of Powys, and they determined to place 100 men in each of the 3 comots of Powys to seek for him. And thus did they in the plains of Powys, from Aberserock, and in Lichtenver, and in Archwide Willier, on the Vyr and Wy, the 3 best comots of Powys. So he was none the better, he nor his household, in Powys nor in the plains thereof. And they spread these men over the plains as far as Nilistun-Trevan. Now one of the men who was upon this quest was called Ronabwy. And Ronabwy and Kinrig Vrichgach, a man of Modwy, and Cadwan Vraz, a man of Moelvra in Kinlife, came together to the house of Highland Gach the son of Cadwan the son of Idun. And when they came near to the house, they saw an old hall, very black and having an upright gable whence issued a great smoke, and on entering they found the floor full of puddles and mounds, and it was difficult to stand thereon. So slippery was it with the mire of cattle. And where the puddles were, a man might go up to his ankles in water and dirt. And there were boughs of holly spread over the floor, whereof the cattle had browsed the sprigs. When they came to the hall of the house, they beheld cells full of dust, and very gloomy, and on one side an old hag making a fire. And whenever she felt cold, she cast a lapful of chaff upon the fire, and raised such a smoke, that it was scarcely to be borne as it rose up the nostrils. And on the other side was a yellow calfskin on the floor, a main privilege was it to any one who should get upon that hide. And when they had sat down, they asked the hag where were the people of the house. And the hag spoke not, but muttered. Thereupon behold, the people of the house entered, a ruddy, clownish, curly-headed man, with a burthen of faggots on his back, and a pale slender woman also carrying a bundle under her arm. And they barely welcomed the men, and kindled a fire with the boughs. And the woman cooked something, and gave them to eat, barley bread, and cheese, and milk, and water. And there arose a storm of wind and rain, so that it was hardly possible to go forth with safety. And being weary with their journey, they laid themselves down and sought to sleep. And when they looked at the couch, it seemed to be made but of a little coarse straw full of dust and vermin, with the stems of boughs sticking up therethrough, for the cattle had eaten all the straw that was placed at the head and the foot. And upon it was stretched an old russet-colored rug, threadbare and ragged, and a coarse sheet, full of slits, was upon the rug, and an ill-stuffed pillow, and a worn-out cover upon the sheet. And after much suffering from the vermin, and from the discomfort of their couch, a heavy sleep fell on Ronabwy's companions. But Ronabwy, not being able either to sleep or to rest, thought he should suffer less if he went to lie upon the yellow calfskin that was stretched out on the floor. And there he slept. As soon as sleep had come upon his eyes, it seemed to him that he was journeying with his companions across the plain of Argengrog, and he thought that he went towards Archwide grows on the Severn. As he journeyed, he heard a mighty noise, the like whereof heard he never before, and looking behind him, he beheld a youth with yellow curling hair, and with his beard newly trimmed, mounted on a chestnut horse, whereof the legs were grey from the top of the forelegs, and from the bend of the hind legs downwards. And the rider wore a coat of yellow satin sewn with green silk, and on his thigh was a gold-hilted sword, with a scabbard of new leather of Cordova, belted with the skin of the deer, and clasped with gold. And over this was a scarf of yellow satin wrought with green silk, the borders whereof were likewise green. And the green of the caparison of the horse and of his rider was as green as the leaves of the fir tree, and the yellow was as yellow as the blossom of the broom. So fierce was the aspect of the night, that fear seized upon them, and they began to flee. And the night pursued them. And when the horse breathed forth, the men became distant from him, and when he drew in his breath, they were drawn near to him, even to the horse's chest. And when he had overtaken them, they besought his mercy. You have it gladly, said he, fear not. Ha, chieftain, since thou hast mercy upon me, tell me also who thou art, said Ronabwy. I will not conceal my lineage from thee. I am Idoc the son of Minio, yet not by my name, but by my nickname am I best known. And wilt thou tell us what thy nickname is? I will tell you, it is Idoc Cord Prydain. Ha, chieftain, said Ronabwy, why art thou called thus? I will tell thee. I was one of the messengers between Arthur and Medrod his nephew at the Battle of Camlan, and I was then a reckless youth, and through my desire for battle I kindled strife between them and stirred up wrath. When I was sent by Arthur the Emperor to reason with Medrod and to show him that he was his foster father and his uncle, and to seek for peace, lest the sons of the kings of the island of Britain and of the nobles should be slain. And whereas Arthur charged me with the fairest sayings he could think of, I uttered unto Medrod the harshest I could devise. And therefore am I called Idachcord Pridain, for from this did the battle of Camlan ensue. And 3 nights before the end of the battle of Camlan I left them, and went to the Lechlas in North Britain to do penance. And there I remained doing penance 7 years, and after that I gained pardon. Then lo! They heard a mighty sound which was much louder than that which they had heard before, and when they looked round towards the sound, they beheld a ruddy youth, without beard or whiskers, noble of mien, and mounted on a stately courser. And from the shoulders and the front of the knees downwards the horse was bay. And upon the man was a dress of red satin wrought with yellow silk, and yellow were the borders of his scarf. And such parts of his apparel and of the trappings of his horse as yellow were they as the blossom of the broom, and such as were red were as ruddy as the ruddiest blood in the world. Then, behold, the horseman overtook them, and he asked of Idach a share of the little men that were with him. That which is fitting for me to grant I will grant, and thou shalt be a companion to them as I have been. And the horseman went away. Idach inquired Ronabwy who was that horseman. Ruvan Pebber the son of Prince Diortak. And they journeyed over the plain of Argengrog as far as the ford of Archwydey grows on the Severn. And for a mile around the ford on both sides of the road they saw tents and encampments, and there was the clamor of a mighty host. And they came to the edge of the ford, and there they beheld Arthur sitting on a flat island below the ford, having Bedwini the bishop on one side of him, and Gwardagi the son of Caw on the other. And a tall, auburn-haired youth stood before him, with his sheathed sword in his hand, and clad in a coat and cap of jet-black satin. And his face was white as ivory, and his eyebrows black as jet, and such part of his wrist as could be seen between his glove and his sleeve was whiter than the lily, and thicker than a warrior's ankle. Then came Idach and they that were with him, and stood before Arthur and saluted him. Heaven grant thee good, said Arthur. And where, Idach, didst thou find these little men? I found them, Lord, up yonder on the road. Then the emperor smiled. Lord, said Idach, wherefore dost thou laugh? Idach, replied Arthur, I laugh not, but it pitieth me that men of such stature as these should have this island in their keeping, after the men that guarded it of yore. Then said Idach, Ronabwy, dost thou see the ring with the stone set in it, that is upon the emperor's hand? I see it, he answered. It is one of the properties of that stone to enable thee to remember that thou sayest here tonight, and hadst thou not seen the stone, thou wouldst never have been able to remember aught thereof. After this they saw a troop coming towards the ford. Idach inquired Ronabwy, to whom does yonder troop belong? They are the fellows of Ruvan Pebber the son of Prince Diortak. And these men are honorably served with mead and bragget, and are freely beloved by the daughters of the kings of the island of Britain. And this they merit, for they were ever in the front and the rear in every peril. And he saw but one hue upon the men and the horses of this troop, for they were all as red as blood. And when one of the knights rode forth from the troop, he looked like a pillar of fire glancing athwart the sky. And this troop encamped above the ford. Then they beheld another troop coming towards the ford, and these from their horses' chests upwards were whiter than the lily, and below blacker than jet. And they saw one of these knights go before the rest, and spur his horse into the ford in such a manner that the water dashed over Arthur and the bishop and those holding counsel with them, so that they were as wet as if they had been drenched in the river. And as he turned the head of his horse, the youth who stood before Arthur struck the horse over the nostrils with his sheathed sword, so that, had it been with the bare blade, it would have been a marvel if the bone had not been wounded as well as the flesh. And the knight drew his sword half out of the scabbard, and asked of him, Wherefore didst thou strike my horse? Whether was it in insult or in counsel unto me? Thou dost indeed lack counsel. What madness caused thee to ride so furiously as to dash the water of the ford over Arthur and the consecrated bishop and their counselors, so that they were as wet as if they had been dragged out of the river? As counsel then will I take it. So he turned his horse's head round towards his army. Idach, said Ronabwy, who was yonder knight? The most eloquent and the wisest youth that is in this island, Adain, the son of Taliesin. Who was the man that struck his horse? A youth of froward nature, Elphin, the son of Gwydno. Then spake a tall and stately man, of noble and flowing speech, saying that it was a marvel that so vast a host should be assembled in so narrow a space, and that it was a still greater marvel that those should be there at that time who had promised to be by midday in the battle of Badon, fighting with Osla Gililvor. Whether thou mayest choose to proceed or not, I will proceed. "Thou sayest well," said Arthur, "and we will go all together." "Idoc," said Rhonabwy, who was the man who spoke so marvellously unto Arthur erewhile? "A man who may speak as boldly as he listeth, Caradoc Fricfras, the son of Elwire Marini, his chief counsellor and his cousin." Then Idoc took Rhonabwy behind him on his horse, and that mighty host moved forward, each troop in its order, towards Sevendegall. And when they came to the middle of the ford of the Severn, Idoc turned his horse's head, and Rhonabwy looked along the valley of the Severn. And he beheld two fair troops coming towards the ford. One troop there came of brilliant white, whereof every one of the men had a scarf of white satin with jet black borders. And the knees and the tops of the shoulders of their horses were jet black, though they were of a pure white in every other part. And their banners were pure white, with black points to them all. "Idoc," said Rhonabwy, "who are yonder pure white troop?" "They are the men of Norway, and March the son of Merchin is their prince. And he is cousin unto Arthur." And further on he saw a troop, whereof each man wore garments of jet black, with borders of pure white to every scarf, and the tops of the shoulders and the knees of their horses were pure white. And their banners were jet black with pure white at the point of each. "Idoc," said Rhonabwy, "who are the jet black troop yonder?" "They are the men of Denmark, and Edern the son of Nud is their prince." And when they had overtaken the host, Arthur and his army of mighty ones dismounted below Kerbedu, and he perceived that he and Idoc journeyed the same road as Arthur. And after they had dismounted he heard a great tumult and confusion amongst the host, and such as were then at the flanks turned to the center, and such as had been in the center moved to the flanks. And then, behold, he saw a knight coming, clad, both he and his horse, in mail, of which the rings were whiter than the whitest lily, and the rivets redder than the ruddiest blood. And he rode amongst the host. "Idoc," said Rhonabwy, "will yonder host flee?" "King Arthur never fled, and if this discourse of thine were heard, thou wert a lost man. But as to the knight whom thou sayest yonder, it is Kai. The fairest horseman is Kai in all Arthur's court, and the men who are at the front of the army hasten to the rear to see Kai ride, and the men who are in the center flee to the side from the shock of his horse. And this is the cause of the confusion of the host." Thereupon they heard a call made for Cador, Earl of Cornwall, and behold, he arose with the sword of Arthur in his hand. And the similitude of two serpents was upon the sword in gold. And when the sword was drawn from its scabbard, it seemed as if two flames of fire burst forth from the jaws of the serpents, and then, so wonderful was the sword, that it was hard for any one to look upon it. And the host became still, and the tumult ceased, and the earl returned to the tent. "Idoc," said Rhonabwy, "who is the man who bore the sword of Arthur?" "Cador, the Earl of Cornwall, whose duty it is to arm the king on the days of battle and warfare." And they heard a call made for Ironwich Amhaben, Arthur's servant, a red, rough, ill-favored man, having red whiskers with bristly hairs. And behold, he came upon a tall red horse with the mane parted on each side, and he brought with him a large and beautiful sumpter pack. And the huge red youth dismounted before Arthur, and he drew a golden chair out of the pack, and a carpet of diapered satin. And he spread the carpet before Arthur, and there was an apple of ruddy gold at each corner thereof, and he placed the chair upon the carpet. And so large was the chair that 3 armed warriors might have sat therein. Gwen was the name of the carpet, and it was one of its properties that whoever was upon it no one could see him, and he could see everyone. And it would retain no color but its own. And Arthur sat within the carpet, and Owain the son of Urien was standing before him. "Owain," said Arthur, "wilt thou play chess?" "I will, lord," said Owain. And the red youth brought the chess for Arthur and Owain, golden pieces, and a board of silver. And they began to play. And while they were thus, and when they were best amused with their game, behold, they saw a white tent with a red canopy, and the figure of a jet-black serpent on the top of the tent, and red glaring venomous eyes in the head of the serpent, and a red flaming tongue. And there came a young page with yellow curling hair, and blue eyes, and a newly springing beard, wearing a coat and a surcoat of yellow satin, and hose of thin greenish-yellow cloth upon his feet, and over his hose shoes of party-colored leather, fastened at the insteps with golden clasps. And he bore a heavy 3-edged sword with a golden hilt in a scabbard of black leather tipped with fine gold. And he came to the place where the emperor and Owain were playing at chess. And the youth saluted Owain. And Owain marveled that the youth should salute him and should not have saluted the emperor Arthur. And Arthur knew what was in Owain's thought. And he said to Owain, "Marvel not that the youth salutes thee now, for he saluted me erewhile, and it is unto thee that his errand is." Then said the youth unto Owain, "Lord, is it with thy leave that the young pages and attendants of the emperor harass and torment and worry thy ravens? And if it be not with thy leave, cause the emperor to forbid them." "Lord," said Owain, "thou hearest what the youth says. If it seem good to thee, forbid them from my ravens." "Play thy game," said he. Then the youth returned to the tent. That game did they finish, and another they began, and when they were in the midst of the game, behold, a ruddy young man with auburn curling hair and large eyes, well-grown, and having his beard new-shorn, came forth from a bright yellow tent, upon the summit of which was the figure of a bright red lion. And he was clad in a coat of yellow satin, falling as low as the small of his leg, and embroidered with threads of red silk. And on his feet were hose of fine white buckram, and buskins of black leather were over his hose, whereon were golden clasps. And in his hand a huge, heavy, three-edged sword, with a scabbard of red deer hide, tipped with gold. And he came to the place where Arthur and Owain were playing at chess. And he saluted him. And Owain was troubled at his salutation, but Arthur minded it no more than before. And the youth said unto Owain, Is it not against thy will that the attendants of the emperor harass thy ravens, killing some and worrying others? If against thy will it be, beseech him to forbid them. Lord, said Owain, forbid thy men, if it seem good to thee. Play thy game, said the emperor. And the youth returned to the tent. And that game was ended and another begun. And as they were beginning the first move of the game, they beheld at a small distance from them a tent speckled yellow, the largest ever seen, and the figure of an eagle of gold upon it, and a precious stone on the eagle's head. And coming out of the tent, they saw a youth with thick yellow hair upon his head, fair and comely, and a scarf of blue satin upon him, and a brooch of gold in the scarf upon his right shoulder, as large as a warrior's middle finger. And upon his feet were hose of fine tautness, and shoes of party-colored leather, clasped with gold, and the youth was of noble bearing, fair of face, with ruddy cheeks and large hawk's eyes. In the hand of the youth was a mighty lance, speckled yellow, with a newly sharpened head, and upon the lance a banner displayed. Fiercely angry and with rapid pace came the youth to the place where Arthur was playing at chess with Owain. And they perceived that he was wroth. And thereupon he saluted Owain, and told him that his ravens had been killed, the chief part of them, and that such of them as were not slain were so wounded and bruised that not one of them could raise its wings a single fathom above the earth. Lord, said Owain, forbid thy men. Play, said he, if it please thee. Then said Owain to the youth, Go back, and wherever thou findest the strife at the thickest, there lift up the banner, and let come what pleases heaven. So the youth returned back to the place where the strife bore hardest upon the ravens, and he lifted up the banner, and as he did so they all rose up in the air, wrathful and fierce and high of spirit, clapping their wings in the wind, and shaking off the weariness that was upon them. And recovering their energy and courage, furiously and with exultation did they, with one sweep, descend upon the heads of the men who had erewhile caused them anger and pain and damage, and they seized some by the heads and others by the eyes, and some by the ears, and others by the arms, and carried them up into the air, and in the air there was a mighty tumult with the flapping of the wings of the triumphant ravens, and with their croaking, and there was another mighty tumult with the groaning of the men that were being torn and wounded, and some of whom were slain. And Arthur and Owain marveled at the tumult as they played at chess, and looking, they perceived a knight upon a dun-colored horse coming towards them. And marvelous was the hue of the dun horse. Bright red was his right shoulder, and from the top of his legs to the center of his hoof was bright yellow. Both the knight and his horse were fully equipped with heavy foreign armor. The clothing of the horse from the front opening upwards was of bright red sandal, and from thence opening downwards was of bright yellow sandal. A large gold-hilted one-edged sword had the youth upon his thigh, in a scabbard of light blue and tipped with Spanish laton. The belt of the sword was of dark green leather with golden slides and a clasp of ivory upon it, and a buckle of jet black upon the clasp. A helmet of gold was on the head of the knight, set with precious stones of great virtue, and at the top of the helmet was the image of a flame-colored leopard with 2 ruby-red stones in its head, so that it was astounding for a warrior, however stout his heart, to look at the face of the leopard, much more at the face of the knight. He had in his hand a blue-shafted lance, but from the haft to the point it was stained crimson-red with the blood of the ravens and their plumage. The knight came to the place where Arthur and Owain were seated at chess. And they perceived that he was harassed and vexed and weary as he came towards them. And the youth saluted Arthur, and told him that the ravens of Owain were slaying his young men and attendants. And Arthur looked at Owain and said, Forbid thy ravens. Lord, answered Owain, play thy game. And they played. And the knight returned back towards the strife, and the ravens were not forbidden any more than before. And when they had played a while, they heard a mighty tumult, and a wailing of men, and a croaking of ravens, as they carried the men in their strength into the air, and tearing them betwixt them, let them fall piecemeal to the earth. And during the tumult they saw a knight coming towards them on a light grey horse, and the left foreleg of the horse was jet black to the center of his hoof. And the knight and the horse were fully accoutred with huge heavy blue armor. And a robe of honor of yellow diapered satin was upon the knight, and the borders of the robe were blue. And the housings of the horse were jet black, with borders of bright yellow. And on the thigh of the youth was a sword, long and three-edged and heavy. And the scabbard was of red cut leather, and the belt of new red deerskin, having upon it many golden slides, and a buckle of the bone of the seahorse, the tongue of which was jet black. A golden helmet was upon the head of the knight, wherein were set sapphire stones of great virtue. And at the top of the helmet was the figure of a flame-colored lion, with a fiery red tongue, issuing above a foot from his mouth, and with venomous eyes, crimson red, in his head. And the knight came, bearing in his hand a thick ashen lance, the head whereof, which had been newly steeped in blood, was overlaid with silver. And the youth saluted the emperor. Lord, said he, carest thou not for the slaying of thy pages and thy young men, and the sons of the nobles of the island of Britain, whereby it will be difficult to defend this island from henceforward forever? Owain, said Arthur, forbid thy ravens. Play this game, Lord, said Owain. So they finished the game and began another, and as they were finishing that game, lo, they heard a great tumult and a clamor of armed men, and a croaking of ravens, and a flapping of wings in the air, as they flung down the armor entire to the ground, and the men and the horses piecemeal. Then they saw coming a knight on a lofty-headed piebald horse. And the left shoulder of the horse was of bright red, and its right leg from the chest to the hollow of the hoof was pure white. And the knight and horse were equipped with arms of speckled yellow, variegated with Spanish laton. And there was a robe of honor upon him, and upon his horse, divided in two parts, white and black, and the borders of the robe of honor were of golden purple. And above the robe he wore a sword three-edged and bright, with a golden hilt. And the belt of the sword was of yellow gold work, having a clasp upon it of the eyelid of a black seahorse, and a tongue of yellow gold to the clasp. Upon the head of the knight was a bright helmet of yellow laton, with sparkling stones of crystal in it, and at the crest of the helmet was the figure of a griffin, with a stone of many virtues in its head. And he had an ashen spear in his hand, with a round shaft, colored with azure blue. And the head of the spear was newly stained with blood, and was overlaid with fine silver. Wrathfully came the knight to the place where Arthur was, and he told him that the ravens had slain his household and the sons of the chief men of this island, and he besought him to cause Owain to forbid his ravens. And Arthur besought Owain to forbid them. Then Arthur took the golden chessmen that were upon the board, and crushed them until they became as dust. Then Owain ordered Gers the son of Reg to lower his banner. So it was lowered, and all was peace. Then Rhonabwy inquired of Iddawc who were the first 3 men that came to Owain, to tell him his ravens were being slain. Said Iddawc, they were men who grieved that Owain should suffer loss, his fellow chieftains and companions, Selv the son of Kynan Garwin of Powys, and Gwan Gledavrud, and Gers the son of Reg, he who bears the banner in the day of battle and strife. Who, said Rhonabwy, were the last 3 men who came to Arthur, and told him that the ravens were slaughtering his men? The best of men, said Iddawc, and the bravest, and who would grieve exceedingly that Arthur should have damage in aught, Blathan the son of Morheth, and Reuvan Pebber the son of Prince Diorthach, and Hyvaid Unlen. And with that behold 24 knights came from Osla Gililvor, to crave a truce of Arthur for a fortnight and a month. And Arthur rose and went to take counsel. And he came to where a tall, auburn, curly-headed man was a little way off, and there he assembled his counselors. Bedwini, the bishop, and Gwardagi the son of Caw, and March the son of Merchon, and Caradoc Frykfras, and Gwalchmai the son of Gwair, and Adern the son of Nud, and Reuvan Pebber the son of Prince Diorthach, and Ryagan the son of the king of Ireland, and Gwenwynwyn the son of Nav, Howell the son of Amir Lidaw, Gwilym the son of Rhwyf Frank, and Dane the son of 8H, and Goria Custanan, and Mabin the son of Modron, and Peredur Paladar here, and Hyvaid Unlen, and Twrch the son of Perif, and Nerth the son of Cadern, and Goberwi the son of Ekelvord Whitwell, Gwer the son of Gwestel, and Gadwi the son of Geraint, Tristan the son of Talch, Moryen Manoch, Gramlin the son of Llwyr, and Lecha the son of Arthur, and Lovroded Varvok, and Cadar Earl of Cornwall, Morvern the son of Tegid, and Ryod the son of Morgant, and Dwyve Wyre the son of Aelendived, Gwrhyr Gwalstad Ithod, Adain the son of Taliesin, Larry the son of Casner Ledig, and Flutterflam, and Greydall. Galdavide, Gilbert the son of Cagifro, Men the son of Tirgwade, Gwrehmwl Ledig, Cordav the son of Caradoc Frykfras, Gildus the son of Caw, Cadiriath the son of Sadie, and many of the men of Norway and Denmark, and many of the men of Greece, and a crowd of the men of the host came to that council. Iddawc, said Rhonabwy, who was the auburn-haired man to whom they came just now, Run the son of Maelgun Gwynedd, a man whose prerogative it is that he may join in council with all. And wherefore did they admit into council with men of such dignity as are yonder a stripling so young as Cadiriath the son of Sadie? Because there is not throughout Britain a man better skilled in council than he. Thereupon, behold, bards came and recited verses before Arthur, and no man understood those verses but Cadiriath only, save that they were in Arthur's praise. And lo, there came 24 asses with their burdens of gold and of silver, and a tired wayworn man with each of them, bringing tribute to Arthur from the islands of Greece. Then Cadiriath the son of Sadie besought that a truce might be granted to Osla-Gilvor for the space of a fortnight and a month, and that the asses and the burdens they carried might be given to the bards, to be to them as the reward for their stay, and that their verse might be recompensed during the time of the truce. And thus it was settled. Ronabwi, said Idok, would it not be wrong to forbid a youth who can give counsel so liberal as this from coming to the counsels of his lord? Then Kai arose, and he said, whosoever will follow Arthur, let him be with him tonight in Cornwall, and whosoever will not, let him be opposed to Arthur even during the truce. And through the greatness of the tumult that ensued, Ronabwi awoke. And when he awoke he was upon the yellow calfskin, having slept 3 nights and 3 days. And this tale is called the Dream of Ronabwi. And this is the reason that no one knows the dream without a book, neither bard nor gifted seer, because of the various colors that were upon the horses, and the many wondrous colors of the arms, and of the panoply, and of the precious scarfs, and of the virtue-bearing stones.